I've been fired once in my career. It happened on a Thursday afternoon in front of 30 people by a guy who'd been CFO for 3 weeks. "I don't need your process checklist. Clear your desk." The words came out of Tyler Brennan's mouth like he'd been practicing them in the mirror, loud enough that Amanda from AP dropped her coffee mug, loud enough that the summer intern looked up from his phone with actual concern on his face. I was standing by the printer pulling the last page of a vendor authorization report when Ty decided to make me his first public execution. He'd been CFO for exactly 3 weeks, fresh from some consulting gig where he probably spent more time making PowerPoints than actually understanding how money moves through a company. Look, I'm 56 years old. I've been at Bayrock Systems for 14 years. I built the entire vendor integration system from scratch. Every payment protocol, every compliance checkpoint, every authorization chain that keeps this company from getting sued into oblivion. But Ty didn't know that, or didn't care. "You heard me," he said, puffing out his chest. "Your bottlenecks have cost us weeks. Procurement is a blocker, not a value driver. You've been here too long. Get out." The floor went dead silent. Even the sales guys stopped bragging about their golf handicaps. I turned around slowly, looked at him the way you look at someone trying to fix a carburetor with a butter knife. Then I did something that probably confused him. I smiled, not a big smile, just the kind that says, "Oh buddy, you really don't know what you just did." While Ty strutted off like he'd just closed a billion-dollar deal, I unplugged my laptop, dropped it in my bag, and started packing my things. 2 framed certificates from vendor compliance training courses. My thermos that I'd had since 2013. The same one I filled every morning at 6:30 a.m. before anyone else showed up to fix the overnight vendor issues nobody knew were happening. Then there was the cactus. Small thing in a ceramic pot. I'd kept it alive for 7 years. Watered it every Monday morning, same as I'd run the compliance checks, updated the vendor protocols, fixed the weekend emergencies. 7 years keeping that plant alive. Longer than Ty had been out of business school. Longer than most people lasted at Bayrock before burning out or moving on. Here's the thing about working somewhere for 14 years. You don't just do your job. You become the infrastructure. You're the person who knows that the payment gateway has a quirk where it needs manual approval every 3rd Friday because of a vendor contract clause from 2018. You're the guy who built the integration endpoints and personally configured the IP whitelists. You're the one who negotiated the service authorization addendum that everyone else forgot existed. I'd seen this before. Not personally, but I'd watched it happen across the industry. I2K, the dot-com crash, the 2008 collapse. Every time, same pattern. Young hotshot comes in, thinks speed equals strategy, fires the quiet guy in the corner who actually knows where the fuse box is, then acts surprised when the lights go out. I handed my badge to HR without saying a word. No scene, no crying in the stairwell, no awkward hugs from people who never bothered learning how to pronounce my last name correctly. Just a quiet nod and a glance at the wall clock. 4:57 p.m., 3 minutes before end of day, because even now I wasn't going to give them a full hour of free labor. The truth was, I wasn't just some paper pusher who liked checklists. I was the only person at Bayrock who held vendor override authority for Infranet Global, the infrastructure company that handled 70% of our payment operations. My name was embedded in their authentication protocols. My personal credential string, GPP-14-VRS, was hard-coded into their escalation system. And Ty had absolutely no idea. What he also didn't know was that I'd spent the last 6 months renegotiating our service authorization with Infranet. Updated every clause, every override procedure, every compliance checkpoint. All of it required my signature, my authorization token, my biometric verification. Not legals, not ITs, not even the CEOs. I learned to document everything back in 2003 when a server farm fire wiped out half our digital records. Everyone else was scrambling, panicking about lost data. I walked into the office the next morning with 3 boxes of paper backups and restored critical vendor relationships in 48 hours. After that, I never stopped keeping physical copies. Called it paranoid. Called it old school. I called it insurance. And now, thanks to Ty's little power trip, that authority had just walked out the door in a pair of worn Rockports and a polo shirt I'd bought at Costco. As I waited for the elevator, I took one last look at the office. Same place where I'd fixed problems at 6 in the morning before anyone else showed up. Where I'd trained 3 generations of junior analysts, patiently explaining why shortcuts in compliance always cost more in the long run. Where I'd once spent Christmas weekend rewriting an entire vendor protocol to prevent a $4 million breach. But nobody remembered that. They just remembered my checklists and my paper binders. I didn't feel angry. Not yet, I just felt 2 steps ahead. My phone buzzed as I walked to my car. Text from Leo Sullivan, Senior Vendor Operations Manager. We'd worked together for 12 years. What the hell just happened? Everyone's freaking out. I typed back, "Tie happened. I'll call you tonight." This is insane. You built that system. I know. They're screwed without you. I put my phone away and unlocked my car. A 2015 Honda Accord with 140,000 miles on it. Paid off, reliable. Unlike most things at Bayrock these days, by the time I got home, I'd already drafted an email to my contact at Infernet Global. Subject line, authorization status change, documentation attached. Because here's what happens when you fire someone without checking what they actually do. You don't just lose an employee, you cut a load-bearing beam and pretend the ceiling won't fall. I was the beam, and they were about to feel it crack. I didn't sleep well that weekend. Not because I was worried, I knew exactly what was coming. Monday morning, Ty would walk into the leadership meeting like Caesar returning from Gaul, and by Wednesday, the whole thing would start crumbling. Sure enough, Monday at 9 a.m., Ty had a PowerPoint ready, titled New Era of Efficiency in Arial font, all caps. The first slide had a bar graph showing process time before me versus projected time without me. No data sources, no footnotes, just numbers he'd clearly invented over the weekend while sipping his oat milk latte. By removing the bottlenecks, he announced, beaming like a kid who just got his learner's permit, we're fast-tracking agility. Vendor approvals are no longer a maze of dead ends and outdated protocols. Nobody clapped. Even HR looked confused. But since nobody wanted to be next on Ty's chopping block, the meeting limped forward with fake enthusiasm and the kind of forced optimism that sounds like someone saying, let's circle back and pretending it's a real thing that will happen. By Tuesday morning, things started getting weird. Amanda from AP sent an email to the finance team at 8:47 a.m. Payment batch kicked back again. System says authorization missing, escalation officer override required. Anyone know what that means? Ty personally approved 5 payments without routing them through vendor validation. When Amanda tried to flag it, pointing at a red highlighted box in the system that literally said requires risk review, he waved her off like she was offering him a timeshare brochure. We don't need red tape. Just process it. We're done worshiping checklists. I'd worked with Amanda for 3 years. She was good at her job, careful, actually read the procedure manuals. She'd been promoted from payroll assistant just 3 weeks ago, right before Ty arrived. Now she was stuck trying to navigate a system I'd built while Ty told her to ignore every safety rail. By Wednesday, the whispers turned into actual problems. Travel reimbursements bounced back. Software renewal invoices sat unpaid in the queue. The regional sales director emailed finance 6 times about a frozen payment to a hotel chain for a client retreat. No response. Someone posted in the Slack #finance-ops channel, does anyone know if Greg's team is still handling vendor approvals? Long silence, then someone from marketing posted a GIF, a dumpster on fire. That's when Sam Torres from IT got pulled into a call. Sam was 31, sharp as hell, one of those engineers who actually understood that infrastructure isn't just code, it's the relationships and protocols that make code work. I'd worked with him on the vendor integration rebuild in 2019. We've got an error, Amanda told him, screen sharing the payment portal. Every time I submit the expense batch, it kicks back with error code VRSAUTHFAIL. Sam pulled up the back-end logs, scrolled through lines of authentication attempts. Okay, this is looking for escalation authorization from credential string GPP-14-VRS. Wait, he stopped scrolling. That's Greg Patterson's override ID. Can you just change it to someone else? Amanda asked, not from our end. This is embedded in Infernet's security infrastructure. It's not a setting we control. It's hard-coded into the contract protocol. So what do we do? Sam was quiet for a moment. You'd need to contact the vendor and request a credential transfer, which requires authorization from the current escalation officer. Who's the current officer? Greg. The Slack channel went silent after that. Thursday morning, the payment system stopped working entirely. Not slow, not delayed. Just stopped. Amanda looked like she hadn't slept. Dark circles under her eyes, coffee cup shaking slightly in her hand. She'd tried submitting expense batches 3 times, and every time the system rejected them with the same error code. It says we need escalation officer override. I don't know what that means or how to fix it. Ty stormed into the bullpen like his hair was on fire, AirPods still in, standing desk abandoned. What the hell is going on? Why are payments frozen? The system's locked, Amanda said, voice shaking. Even the standard vendor payments won't process. Then bypass it. We can't. The authorization protocol is hard-coded. Ty's ears went red. Not his face, just his ears. 2 little warning lights. Get it on a call. Now, they set up a Zoom. Sam joined along with 2 other engineers and someone from Infernet's technical support line. 4 calls and 90 minutes later, they all said the same thing. The payment gateway wasn't broken. It was doing exactly what it was designed to do. The authorization protocol required a unique token string tied to GPP14VRS credential level. That credential was linked to one person's biometric authentication profile, embedded during the 2022 security upgrade I'd personally overseen. So remove it, Ty snapped at his screen. Replace it with someone else. Update the system. Sam Torres shook his head slowly. That credential is embedded in the vendor's onboarding protocol at the infrastructure level. It's not editable from our side. You'd have to escalate through the vendor's security team. Fine, do that. Which requires contacting your designated escalation officer to authorize the credential transfer. The room got very quiet. You mean Greg? Ty said slowly, like the words were physically painful. Yep, Sam shared his screen. Showed them the back-end authentication logs. Every payment attempt hitting the same wall. Request escalation youth. Credential required GPP-14-VRS. Status unavailable. This is a custom integration, Sam explained, highlighting a section of code. Built in 2019, updated in 2022. Greg configured the IP whitelists, the authorization chains, the fallback procedures. There's no documentation on our end because... He trailed off. Because what? Ty demanded. Because he was the documentation. While Ty was having his meltdown in the conference room, my phone buzzed. LinkedIn message from Keith Anderson, Vendor Relations Manager at Infernet Global. We'd worked together for 6 years. He'd always brought lemon bars to quarterly meetings and once accidentally called Ty Chief Financial Obstruction Officer in front of the whole vendor ops team. Hey Greg, sorry to bother you. Are you still at Bayrock? We've got a weird escalation issue on our end and your name's still flagged in our authorization protocols. Everything okay? I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up my personal archive, the one I'd maintained for 14 years. Every signed authorization form, every vendor correspondence, every negotiated clause, all organized by date, by vendor, by contract cycle. Digital copies, sure, but also 3-ring binders in my garage, alphabetized and cross-referenced. Because I'd learned a long time ago that when systems fail, paper doesn't. I found what I was looking for. The Service Authorization Addendum, revised October 2022. Clause 6.1, Vendor Escalation Procedures. My signature at the bottom. My credential string embedded in the authentication protocol. I opened a new document. Started typing. Vendor Continuity Proposal. Independent Consulting Services. By Friday morning, vendors started sending formal notices. Not polite reminder emails. Legal notices with subject lines in all caps and CC'd attorneys. Payment overdue. Immediate action required. Breach of contract notification. Net 30 terms violated. One vendor suspended active services. Another escalated directly to Bayrock's legal department. And Infernet Global, the big one responsible for 70% of payment operations, flagged the account as non-responsive to compliance requirements and froze all gateway access. That's when Lillian Crawford got involved. Lillian was Bayrock's external legal counsel, late 50s, steel gray hair, the kind of lawyer who charged enough per hour to own a vacation home she never visited because she was always working. When Lillian showed up to a meeting, it meant someone had screwed up badly enough that the company needed protection from itself. She walked into Ty's office Friday afternoon with a printed document. Didn't knock, didn't wait for permission. Just walked in and dropped the papers on his desk. I've reviewed the vendor protocols for Infernet Global. As of this moment, your contracts are non-functional. Access is suspended across all payment systems. Ty looked up from his laptop where he'd been frantically Googling how to override vendor authorization protocols. Define non-functional, meaning you are not compliant with escalation authorization procedures. Your primary vendor has revoked system access. You cannot process payments, submit reimbursements, or deploy infrastructure updates until the designated escalation officer is reinstated or replaced through a full re-execution cycle. We're working on reassignment. Lillian didn't blink. No, you're not. You attempted to backdate override forms yesterday without proper credential chains. Infernet's legal team caught it. We will not participate in fraud, Mr. Brennan. The office went quiet enough to hear the HVAC system humming. Lillian flipped through the contract, sticky notes marking specific pages. Clause 6.1 states clearly that only Gregory Patterson is authorized for escalation overrides. He holds sole override authority. The credential string embedded in your onboarding protocols is biometrically linked. You cannot duplicate or replace it without a full vendor-side system rebuild. She placed the contract on Ty's desk, open to a page with my signature. Tell me, Mr. Brennan, who exactly did you think signed this? Meanwhile, across town in my garage workshop, I was sanding a piece of oak for a bookshelf I'd been meaning to build for my daughter. The radio was on, some classic rock station. My phone sat on the workbench, lighting up every few minutes with notifications I wasn't checking. Leo called around 2 in the afternoon. Greg, we need to talk. What's up? I'm resigning. He said it flat, no drama. I can't work for someone who fires the one person who actually knows how anything works. I've been here 11 years. I've watched 3 different CEOs try to modernize and streamline, and every time you're the one who keeps the lights on. I put down the sandpaper. You don't have to do that. Yeah, I do. Amanda's drowning. Sam's getting blamed for things he can't fix, and Ty's running around like a drunk driver wondering why the car won't steer. He paused. You know what you're gonna do next? Got some ideas. Good, because I want in. Whatever you're building, I want to help build it. That evening, I finally replied to Keith's LinkedIn message. Keith, no longer with Bayrock as of last week. Happy to discuss the authorization protocols. Are you available for a call Monday? His response came back in 5 minutes. Absolutely, I'll loop in our executive team. Would 10 a.m. work? I smiled, typed back perfect. Then I opened the consulting proposal I'd been working on. Read through it one more time. Added a section about transition support and interim authorization management. Set my hourly rate at exactly 3 times what Bayrock had been paying me annually, divided by 2,000 hours. It wasn't revenge. It was fair market value for expertise they should have appreciated when they had it. Monday morning at 10, I joined a Zoom call with Keith Anderson and Malcolm Pierce, CEO of Infernet Global. Malcolm was 52, gray at the temples, the kind of executive who spoke softly because he didn't need volume to command attention. Greg, thanks for making time, Malcolm started. We've got a situation with Bayrock Systems that's created some complexity on our end. Your name is embedded throughout their authorization infrastructure, and we're getting escalation requests that are hitting dead ends. I'm aware I built most of that infrastructure, so we understand. We also received some concerning communications from their team late last week. Attempted credential modifications without proper authorization chains. I nodded. That would be Tyler Brennan, their new CFO. He terminated my employment last Thursday without reviewing what systems I managed. Keith winced visibly on screen. That explains a lot. Malcolm leaned forward slightly. Greg, we've reviewed your authorization history with us. 6 years of flawless compliance, 0 escalation failures, 2 prevented audit issues that Bayrock probably never even knew about. We'd like to discuss bringing you on as an independent consultant. You'd work with us directly on vendor liaison services, not just for Bayrock, but for other clients who need authorization infrastructure support. I'm listening. We're thinking a 12-month contract to start. Scope would include protocol restoration for Bayrock, if and when you're willing, plus ongoing advisory for our compliance framework. We'd structure it as a consulting arrangement, your terms on hours and rate. I pulled up the proposal I'd written. I actually have something drafted. Let me share my screen. We spent 40 minutes going through details. Hourly rate, minimum engagement, scope boundaries. Malcolm didn't flinch at my numbers. Didn't try to negotiate down. Just nodded and said, that's fair for someone with your expertise. By the end of the call, we had a handshake agreement. Full contract to follow by Wednesday. One question, Malcolm said before we hung up. When Bayrock reaches out, and they will, what are you planning to tell them? That I'm happy to help restore their authorization protocols. At my consulting rate, through Infernet, not directly with them. And only after they acknowledge what actually happened. Malcolm smiled. Professional and appropriate. We'll support whatever decision you make. After the call ended, I sat in my garage for a minute looking at the half-finished bookshelf. My phone buzzed. Text from Leo. How'd it go? Good, really good. They want both of us. You interested in co-consulting? 3 dots appeared, then, hell yes. When do we start? I'll forward you the contract details tonight. We'll talk rates tomorrow. I stood up, stretched, and went back to sanding. The wood was smooth under my hands, the grain coming through clean. Methodical work. The kind where you see progress in real time, where quality matters more than speed. My phone buzzed again. This time, a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't recognize. Profile showed junior engineer at Bayrock, maybe 25 years old. Mr. Patterson, I heard you left the company. I'm new to the infrastructure team and everyone keeps talking about systems you built. Would you be willing to grab coffee sometime? I'd really like to learn from someone who actually knows this stuff. I looked at the message for a long moment, thought about all the junior analysts I'd trained over 14 years. The ones who'd actually listened, asked questions, read the documentation instead of just Googling for shortcuts. Typed back, sure. Next Tuesday work? I'll show you why paper backups still matter. Because that's the thing they don't teach in business school. Systems are built by people, and when you fire the person who built the system, you better hope they documented everything. I had, every single piece. Tuesday morning, an emergency board meeting was called at Bayrock. I wasn't there, obviously, but Leo filled me in on the details later. He was still technically employed for another week, working his notice period, watching the whole thing fall apart from the inside. Howard Ashford, the CEO, opened the meeting looking like he'd aged 10 years in a week. Golf tan faded, tie loose, the kind of exhausted that comes from realizing you let someone burn down the building while you were out playing 18 holes. We have a significant operational crisis, he started. No preamble, no small talk. Our primary vendor has frozen all payment processing capabilities. We are currently unable to process payroll, vendor payments, or client reimbursements. Legal has informed me we're in breach of contract with multiple partners. Ty sat at the far end of the table, quiet for once. No PowerPoint, no buzzwords about agility. Just a guy who'd finally run out of things to say. Lillian Crawford walked them through the situation. The core issue is that your vendor authorization infrastructure was built around a single escalation officer, Gregory Patterson. When he was terminated without proper transition protocols, you effectively locked yourselves out of your own payment systems. One of the board members, a woman who'd been on the board since before I was hired, spoke up. Why wasn't there redundancy? Why was one person the single point of failure? There was supposed to be, Lillian said, pulling out documentation. Greg submitted requests for a backup authorization officer in 2020, 2021, and 2022. All 3 requests were denied due to budget constraints. She looked directly at Ty. The most recent denial was signed by your predecessor 3 months before Mr. Brennan arrived. Howard closed his eyes briefly. So we had multiple warnings. You had a protocol. It required resources. You chose not to allocate them. The board member looked at Ty. And you fired him anyway. I was assured by IT that vendor systems were standardized, Ty said quietly. I didn't know he was the sole authorization officer. Did you ask? Lillian's voice was surgical. Did you review his role before termination? Did you consult with legal, with operations, with anyone who'd worked with vendor protocols? Ty didn't answer. Howard leaned forward. What are our options? 3 paths, Lillian said. 1, we can attempt a full system rebuild with a new vendor. Estimated timeline is 6 to 9 months, cost in the 7 figures, and we'd need to maintain current client obligations somehow during the transition. 2, we can go through Infranet's standard re-onboarding process. 90 days minimum, full compliance review, no guarantee of approval. Or 3, we contact Greg Patterson and request his assistance in restoring authorization protocols. Has anyone reached out to him? Howard asked. I called him this morning, Ty said so quietly it was almost a whisper. He didn't answer. Leo told me later that the silence after that statement was one of the most uncomfortable moments he'd ever witnessed in a corporate setting. Perhaps Lillian suggested someone else should make that call. That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number, but a local area code. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Patterson, this is Howard Ashford. I'm hoping you have a few minutes to talk. I put down the sandpaper I'd been using on the bookshelf. Walked out to my driveway, phone to my ear. I've got time. I want to apologize for how your departure was handled. It was unprofessional, and it didn't reflect the value you brought to this organization over 14 years. I appreciate that, Howard. We're in a difficult situation with our vendor systems. I understand you've been in contact with Infranet Global. I have. They've offered me a consulting arrangement. Howard was quiet for a moment. Greg, I'll be direct. We need your help to restore authorization protocols. I know we don't have a right to ask, given the circumstances, but we have employees whose paychecks are at risk, vendors who depend on timely payments. I'm asking if there's any way we can work with you to resolve this. I looked at my garage, at the half-finished bookshelf, at the Honda Accord in the driveway with 140,000 miles on it. Thought about 14 years of fixing problems at 6:30 a.m., training junior analysts who moved on to better jobs, spending Christmas weekend preventing disasters nobody thanked me for. I'm willing to help, I said, but not as an employee and not directly with Bayrock. I've signed a consulting agreement with Infranet Global. If you want my assistance, it goes through them. They'll coordinate the protocol restoration, and I'll work on their timeline, their terms. What would that look like? Infranet will send you a proposal. It'll include my consulting rate, estimated hours for full protocol restoration, and transition planning to prevent this from happening again. The rate will be higher than what you were paying me. Significantly higher. I understand. Howard sounded tired. Will you work with us? On one condition. Amanda Prescott from AP and Sam Torres from IT need to be part of the transition team. They tried to do the right thing last week. They shouldn't be blamed for what happened. Done. Anything else? Yeah, Ty Brennan doesn't get to be in any meetings I attend. Not in person, not on Zoom. That's non-negotiable. Howard didn't hesitate. Agreed. Between you and me, Ty's already submitted his resignation. The board accepted it this morning. I wasn't surprised. All right then. I'll have Infranet send over the proposal by end of day. We can start protocol restoration next week. Thank you, Greg. Howard, one more thing. When this is done, when your systems are back online and you've got backup authorization officers in place, I want you to remember something. What's that? The next time someone tells you a person is a bottleneck, ask yourself if maybe they're actually a load-bearing wall. We hung up. I stood in my driveway for a minute, then went back to the garage. 3 weeks later, Leo and I were sitting in my garage, which we'd converted into a makeshift office. 2 desks, decent Wi-Fi, a coffee maker that actually kept coffee hot. We just signed our 3rd consulting client, a mid-sized tech company that had heard about the Bayrock situation and wanted to avoid becoming the next cautionary tale. We should probably get actual office space, Leo said, looking around at the power tools and half-finished furniture. Why? Overhead is low, commute is 0, and I can work on the bookshelf during lunch. He laughed. Fair point. How's the Bayrock restoration going? Almost done. Amanda's been good to work with. She actually reads documentation, asks smart questions. I'm training her as backup authorization officer. Sam's handling the technical integration. Both of them are solid. Heard Ty's LinkedIn updated to seeking new opportunities. Yeah, I saw that. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly. More like watching someone learn an expensive lesson they should have learned cheaper. My phone buzzed. The young engineer from Bayrock confirming coffee for tomorrow morning. Got a mentorship meeting tomorrow, I told Leo. Kid from the infrastructure team wants to learn vendor protocols. You going to teach him the paper backup philosophy? First thing, I smiled. Bring a box of old contracts to the coffee shop. Show him what documentation actually looks like. Leo shook his head, grinning. You're going to give that kid a complex about digital systems. No, I'm going to teach him that systems fail. People fail. Companies make stupid decisions. The only thing you can control is how well you document what you know and how prepared you are when everything goes sideways. That evening, I finished the bookshelf. Solid oak, dovetail joints, Danish oil finish. The kind of work where you can't skip steps or take shortcuts. Where quality matters more than speed and the result lasts for decades if you do it right. I texted my daughter a picture. Bookshelf's done. Where do you want me to deliver it? She replied immediately. Dad, this is beautiful. This weekend? And can you teach me how to do the oil finish? I want to learn. I smiled at that. Absolutely. Saturday morning work? Because that's what matters in the end. Not the revenge, not the vindication, not even the consulting rate that was triple my old salary. It's the work itself. Building things that last. Teaching people who actually want to learn. Having time to sand wood and drink coffee while it's still hot. My phone buzzed one more time. Email from Malcolm at Infranet. Greg, just closed 2 new clients who specifically requested you for vendor protocol advisory. Both long-term contracts. Can you handle additional workload or should we bring someone else on? I looked around the garage. At the bookshelf, at Leo working on his laptop, at the thermos from 2013 sitting on my workbench. Typed back, let's talk. I think we're ready to expand. Because Ty was right about one thing. I had been a bottleneck at Bayrock. I was the bottleneck that kept the whole system from collapsing. And they never knew it until I was gone. Now I was building something new. Something where people understood that expertise has value, that documentation matters, that the quiet guy in the corner who's been there for 14 years might just be the most important person in the building. And this time I owned it.